Welcome back to another edition of Force Friday, where we talk about Star Wars theories, characters, concepts, comparisons, analyzations, collectibles, and more. And today we're going to be talking about the High Republic era, which is the news most recently revealed from Lucasfilm to be the next era that they plan to dive deep into following the closure of the Skywalker saga at the end of Episode 9. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of speculation and a lot of rumor regarding it. We finally got our first piece of media allowing us to understand a bit of what's coming, so I figured it was a timely episode to do and one that we probably should take a minute and talk about. So where do we start? At the beginning. The High Republic era was originally noted as Project Luminous. At 2019 Star Wars Celebration Chicago, I was there by the way, weird flex, but I gotta do it when I can. Project Luminous was announced to the public. No details were unveiled, only the authors involved in a small teaser image. Since then, speculation ran rampant on what exactly Project Luminous would involve. It was known to be a publishing-only event, but that didn't stop speculation of an animated series or possible movie. Project Luminous was the brainchild of Lucasfilm Publishing's creative director, Michael Siglain, I don't know how to pronounce names, who began approaching the various authors in the summer of 2018. In September of that same year, all 5 of the project's authors were taken to Skywalker Ranch to plan out this new era. They were joined by the Lucasfilm Story Group. Pablo Hidalgo said, "We gave them essentially a blank slate and said, what would you like to tell?" Lucasfilm's James Waugh said that the project sees publishing as an incubation place, bring in great talent and let their imaginations run free. Now, if you've been following the Force Friday stuff, I've made it clear that I think that the key to a lot of this stuff is allowing the creatives to create. And this does sound like exactly that. Bringing creators to a space, allowing them to interact face-to-face, nobody Skyped in, brainstorm face-to-face, create an idea, a blueprint, and let, for lack of a better term, management stay out of the way and just manage. I really and truly think that this is the proper blueprint for allowing something to be great. The creatives don't need to manage, the managers don't need to create. Now, many people, myself included, fell victim to the speculation that this would be the Old Republic era. And while it may end up being somewhat based on that, we do know now that it's set 200 years before the event of Phantom Menace, placing it far after the EU events of the Old Republic. But the timeline itself is up for debate and up for manipulation at this point. The High Republic features the Jedi as we've always wanted to see them, as true guardians of peace and justice. This is a hopeful, optimistic time when the Jedi and the Galactic Republic are at their height. The Jedi of this era have been described as Jedi Knights of the Round Table, true keepers of the peace for a republic that truly stands for all, presumably without the corruption we see throughout the prequels. This, to me, is another element that's super critical. A lot of us always wanted to see Jedi in their prime, and we got that. But when I say that, I don't mean just physically and in terms of knowledge, skill, and ability, but I mean in terms of their proper role within the universe. The Jedi in the prequel era have all kind of fallen victim to what Luke Skywalker describes in Episode 8, The Last Jedi, of believing in their own hubris, believing their own hype, and in many ways not being able to see the forest from the trees, or at the very least, a Sith Lord from a senator. But this is because of a pompous and arrogant attitude that they all kind of have as what could slip past us. We are the Jedi. Even when one of their own comes back with first-hand knowledge of seeing a Sith, they don't believe it. How could this be possible? They would have known, right? So we never got to see the Jedi as their true place in history. We only get to see the Jedi at a space and time when they've become warped, in a manner of speaking, by their own arrogance, and a team sits at a council to decide events that ultimately allow them to be used as a puppet for the very Sith Lord they didn't believe in the first place. So the idea of really seeing the Jedi at their height is very alluring to me. But they have to have a villain, right? And from what we saw in this teaser trailer, the project conflict will arise from the Republic's borders, because at this point, the Republic does not extend from one side of the galaxy to the other. That's a quote from Pablo Hidalgo himself. The Republic's frontiers have been described as a Wild West, with Jedi stationed there as peacekeepers, being compared to a Texas Ranger. No lone protagonist has been announced. We know the era will feature a core group of heroes, and will also explore bounty hunters, smuggler, and non-Jedi of that era, which, of course, we all expect as the template, blueprint, and proper ingredients for the recipe that we know as Star Wars. I do want to take a second, though, and say that I like this idea. I like this idea of the Jedi Knights of the Round Table. And from some of the images that we've seen with their white robes and all of this stuff, and you can kind of see the elements taking place that puts them in the position that we see in the prequels. However, on the borders, on the outskirts, the people that are really in the field, the people that are really in the street, so to speak, are going to be rougher around the edges. We might see some bending of the rules. We might see more concepts that lay a groundwork that allow us to understand the space and time that the Jedis exist philosophically within the prequel era. But back to the conflict. The main villains of this era are the Nile, pronounced just like the famous river in Egypt. Described as space Vikings, they seem to be comprised of various species, including Gungans, Twi'leks, Grand, which is Zuckuss' species, Togrutas, humans, and possibly even my old pal, Two Tubes species. The group motto is, you can't take it with you, but we can take it from you. They have a very haphazard steampunk aesthetic, clearly mixing technology and gear from various species and cultures, which is another theme in Star Wars that it's nice to see revisited. One of the themes of the original trilogy was kind of heart, faith, and spirit, and you might even say hope, over technological advancements, right? So R2 is taken out of the game, and Luke shuts off his targeting computer in order to blow up the Death Star. Leia is able to save Luke through a spiritual connection. The tide is turned in the throne room of the Death Star from Luke touching the spirit of his father, who, as we all know, is more machine now than man. But it's the human part, the man, that Luke makes that connection with. So here we get to see a little bit of that, right? Jedi, followers of a religion of sorts, a philosophy at least, devoted to an ideal and an idea. And then these villains, described as Vikings, that are already incorporating more of a technological means to give them an edge. So it's kind of back to one of the core roots and themes within Star Wars itself. The story of this era will kick off with an event known as the Great Disaster. All that is known about this event is that starships across the galaxy were suddenly thrown from hyperspace. Also somehow involved is the space station named the Starlight Beacon, which acted as a sort of radar to help ships in the Outer Rim find their way. The talent involved, the creatives involved, have described the central premise of the era being discovering and establishing what it is that scares the Jedi. The designs for the characters and era were done by Doug Chiang and Ian McCaig, who have worked extensively on Star Wars media since The Phantom Menace and through the sequels. Both of these gentlemen are extremely talented. Doug with a lot of the... Doug, like I know him, just me and Doug. But anyway, Doug with a lot of the technological elements, the ships and cruisers and skiffs and all of that stuff. And in my opinion, Ian with a lot of the character designs, including some of the most amazing and iconic Star Wars character designs that we have ever seen. So let's go ahead and talk about the confirmed media that we have. The era will kick off with Light of the Jedi. The author has worked extensively on Marvel Comics Star Wars line, particularly the acclaimed Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith series, as well as the ongoing The Rise of Kylo Ren and the newly relaunched Star Wars series. His work is generally held in extremely high regard and esteem. Light of the Jedi will release on August 25th, and the book currently has not released its synopsis. Marvel Comics is entering the game with the self-titled The High Republic. The author has worked extensively for younger Star Wars readers in IDW's Star Wars Adventure series, but also more grown-up stories in the short story From a Certain Point of View in 2017, and Dooku, Jedi Lost, one of the best books of the new canon. All that is known is that the series will be focusing on a newly accomplished Jedi surrounded by legends on a space station called the Starlight Beacon, which hopefully will give us that important and critical information regarding the basis and home base, for lack of a better term, of the series. The High Republic Adventures, IDW comic by Daniel Older, and again, no precise details are given, but this title is mainly aimed towards children and generally features a more lighthearted, childlike tone compared to the main Marvel Comics series. The author, however, wrote for the From a Certain Point of View anthology in 2017, as well as the novel Last Shot featuring Han Solo. A Test of Courage young reader's novel by Justina Ireland, who has written two previous junior novels, Lando's Luck and Spark of the Resistance. And this novel features a young group of Jedi, or as they painfully call them in Revenge of the Sith, younglings. Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. The synopsis reads, Padawan Reath Silas is being sent from the cosmopolitan galactic capital of Coruscant to the underdeveloped frontier, and he couldn't be less happy about it. He'd rather stay at the Jedi Temple studying the archives. But when the ship he's traveling on is knocked out of hyperspace in a galactic-wide disaster, Reath finds himself at the center of the action. The Jedi and their traveling companions find refuge on what appears to be an abandoned space station. But then, strange things start happening, leading the Jedi to investigate the truth behind the mysterious station, a truth that could end in tragedy. Claudia Gray has written several books for the new Star Wars canon: Lost Stars, Bloodline, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Master and Apprentice. She has written several books prior to all of her Star Wars novels and are generally regarded as some of the absolute best in the new canon, and I will personally say that Bloodline is without a doubt the best book I have read within the new canon. There are a lot of things here that do make me believe that it could perhaps lend itself towards an Old Republic style era. This space station reminds me of other things that we've seen in Old Republic, mysterious threats, which is of course part of Star Wars, but also reminds me of Old Republic era. The kind of Jedi place in this reminds me of the Old Republic era. I think this could be a kind of reformatted look at the Old Republic era, taking the themes and elements that we did love and creating something new out of it, which I am excited about. There is another thing that I've noticed recently that I have to make comment on, and it's because I often get my tinfoil hat out. Not saying that this is true, but what fun is Star Wars if we can't speculate about it? Earlier this year, GameStop released an exclusive for the Star Wars Black Series of Darth Revan, perhaps minus the Darth. At Toy Fair, we get a reveal of an upcoming Black Series lightsaber, once again, Darth Revan's, with some color-changing gimmicks. So now the Black Series is establishing both this change in this character's demeanor and attitude. We're getting a story that takes place hundreds of years before the Battle of Yavin, and we're getting product that's directly associated with Darth Revan. Now look, I've heard that there's this thing called coincidence. I know that many people believe in coincidences. I'm just never sure I've actually ever seen one for myself. I say that to say this: I would be very surprised if they didn't tie that character to this series in some regard. They're introducing new characters. They're introducing new themes. They're introducing new eras. They're bringing on creatives to do it. All of that is fine and dandy, and I applaud all of those efforts. However, it does need that linchpin icon. Darth Vader is a linchpin icon. Anytime you throw his face on something, it creates a vibe. I do honestly believe in my heart of hearts that Darth Revan could do the same. The last thing I want to comment on before we get out of here is one of the criticisms of the sequel trilogy has been that perhaps not all of the creators were on the same page and working together and collaboratively in order to create a very fleshed out and cohesive storyline. At the very least, we can say that their initial reception in regards to this High Republic era is being done just that way, meaning they are bringing the people together to flesh out a storyline, a timeline, an idea, a concept, and so on to establish something cohesive. If this is successful, I would imagine that it will yield films from this era. I think them saying it's an incubation space is probably more on the nose than we realize. They're putting organisms into a petri dish, and if it spawns life, we will see media from that era. And as always, I wish them the best. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.